Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. President Donald Trump just got some more terrible economic news, and boy is he in a rage over it. On Wednesday, we learned that the economy contracted in the first quarter, and on 2 separate occasions, Trump unloaded over this, attempting to blame Joe Biden for it. Faced with this situation, some of Trump's aides went full North Korea, bowing down before him and offering adulation in almost shockingly sycophantic terms. Which got us thinking, how long did Trump's advisors think they can keep him in a protective cocoon, shielding him from the realities of his disastrous reign, and why do they think that will get any easier over time rather than harder? New Republic senior editor Alex Shepard has a good new piece arguing that Trump's unpopularity is only going to get a lot worse due to basic structural facts about his presidency. So we're talking to Alex today about all this. Thanks for coming back on, man.
It's great to be here.
So we just learned that U.S. gross domestic product declined by a 0.3% annual rate during this year's first 3 months. There's some uncertainty about the precise accuracy of this data, but what's overwhelmingly clear is that Trump's talk about his own policies basically started wrecking the economy Trump inherited early on. Your reaction to all that, Alex?
The whole thing is ridiculous because, I think all of the sort of top-line economic data from the Biden administration was pretty positive, even if you sort of factor in the inflationary issue. And Trump inherited this, and essentially, in some ways it's not that dissimilar to what he did with the 2017 tax cuts, right? He was gifted this sort of well-oiled, big-picture economy in which, I think a lot of people were nevertheless, understandably in many cases, frustrated, and immediately sort of just pushed it off a cliff. And the idea that this is somehow Biden's fault is, ridiculous, too, I think. I think regardless of what you think about the sort of mechanics of the Biden economy, right? It was the envy of the developed and the undeveloped world. It was working. It was working in, I think, a remarkably perilous post-pandemic environment. And what we're basically headed towards is like a supply shock, stagflation, all simultaneously. And, I think that the one thing that doesn't get hit enough about this is just how completely unnecessary and stupid that it is. No one is asking for any of this. So what we've seen, even the contraction is relatively small at 0.3%. It's 2.7% down from where it was is percent. What you're actually seeing, I think, here is, something like an economic kamikaze mission. It's, there's nothing analogous that I can think of in, contemporary or modern global political history.
Except maybe the beginning of Trump's first term.
Yes.
So Trump unloaded about this twice. First, he erupted on Truth Social saying, quote, "Our country will boom, but we have to get rid of the Biden overhang. This will take a while, has nothing to do with tariffs, only that he left us with bad numbers. But when the boom begins, it will be like no other. Be patient." And there were lots of all caps lines in there. Then, Alex, speaking to reporters, he said this.
Core GDP, and this is, you probably saw some numbers today. And I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January, this are quarterly numbers. And we came in, and I was very against everything that Biden was doing in terms of the economy, destroying our country in so many ways, not only at the border was more obvious, but we took over his mess in so many different ways.
So as you said, the opposite of all this is true. Trump was left an economy that was the envy of the post-COVID Western world, and that wasn't an easy thing to accomplish, right? The entire world was struggling with post-COVID shock, and we did better than pretty much any country on earth. And then Trump immediately started sabotaging what he had been gifted with his tariff threats and the buffoonishly incompetent Elon Musk's huge Doge cuts to the government. Now, Trump is trying to say his policies didn't kick in during the first quarter, but isn't the fact clear that the economy was reacting to his erratic announcements, which created vast uncertainty? Isn't that what happened?
Oh, I think that that's not only true, but I think the actual situation is like a little bit crazier than that too, right? That what Trump is suggesting here is that the economy is bad because it was bad 6 months ago, which we know is not true, and that his tariffs, once they kick in, right, will fix all of it. They'll usher in this, like, you know, it's weird to say because the thing he always references is the late 19th century, a period that was not especially prosperous for the United States, but an era of incredible prosperity, and there will be no income tax, and everyone will be working at an iPhone factory, and we'll all be so happy. But, you know, the reason why the economy is kind of hanging on by a thread right now, right, is that he has kind of backed down, or at least he's, you know, sort of stepped away from the most extreme versions of these tariffs. And that's kind of allowed markets to do the thing that they do best, which is to delude, you know, investors are deluding themselves that maybe it won't be that bad. The statement today, the all cap statement today is him basically, you know, doubling down now for the umpteenth time, right? And saying that these tariffs are the thing that is actually destroying the economy right now is going to save it, right? It's in some ways like an even more demented version of the response to the Great Depression, right? In 29 and 30, that except this time we know it doesn't work. And so, you know, I found the tweet and the statements after to be funny, in part because I think that there's like some sort of, you know, the more all caps there is, like the more panicked, you know, he is. But you know, I think the overall message, you know, if you're an investor or you run a business that relies on any good from overseas, which is a lot of work at one of those businesses, I think you should be very, very worried because the contraction, I think, is only causing Trump to lean further into an economic idea that seemingly he believes will work.
I think that's a really crucial point you get at, which is that investors and CEOs and business owners and so forth across the country are looking to these things, to his tweets, to what he says about the GDP numbers, for some kind of sign, any kind of sign that this guy is capable of learning from what's happening. And all they're getting is an emphatic, no, he isn't.
Yeah, and I think that the economic failure, it's like, I mean, it's a literal, like, the beatings will continue until morale improves, like the tariffs will continue until the economy recovers. And I think that that's really scary that, you know, these are, this is not an economic miracle cure. Nobody believes that it is, right? As somebody who generally is supportive of tariffs and targeted, you know, the way that the Biden administration used them in issues like solar, for instance, but you know, in this instance, like, they just make no sense. I was talking to a guy who owns a coffee shop, right? And you're like, the U.S. can't produce coffee, so why are we putting huge tariffs on it? It just makes absolutely zero sense whatsoever. And again, like, what we're seeing now, I think, is relatively small, right? Like, there aren't supply shortages right now. Like, there probably will be in the next few weeks even. And, you know, once you start to see consumer confidence, which is already, you know, starting to crater, like really start to go down, you know, what you would want to see is an administration that is showing that it can be limber in some way. But, you know, I think it's also worth going back to when Trump backed down from the initial Liberation Day tariffs, right, which were massive. And I think the initial response from most people is to say, look how good it was. He's learning, right? He is taking the tariffs away. And, nothing could have been further from the truth. He left 10% tariffs on, right? These are still, more than 5 times higher than where they were before. And it's not evidence of somebody learning. And I think what we're seeing now is in some ways the opposite, that he's dug in on really what is, I think, probably the single stupidest policy decision that any president, certainly in my lifetime, has ever made.
Spring is finally here. For us in DC, that means cherry blossom, warmer weather, and more breaking news each and every day. To stay up to date on all the news that you need to know, there's no better place than the DSR Network. And there's no better way to enjoy the DSR Network than to become a member. Members enjoy an ad-free listening experience, access to our Discord community, exclusive content, and more. Use code DSR2025 for a 40% off discount on sign-up at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's code DSR2025 at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
I find that really interesting because it's like when he reverses on the tariffs, everybody rushes in to try to provide positive reinforcement. Yeah. They try to, like Fox News, people go out and say what a great genius he is. In fact, you may remember that some of his aides, when he reversed the tariffs the first time, they went out and called it the greatest economic decision by any president or any leader in all of human history. And of course, he doesn't actually take any real message from that. And this is where I want to bring in the adulation of his other aides that happened on Wednesday at Trump's cabinet meeting. They really went full North Korea with the subservience, with the adulation. First, here's Attorney General Pam Bondi.
President, your first 100 days has far exceeded that of any other presidency in this country. Ever. Never seen anything like it. Thank you.
Second, here's Secretary of the Interior Doug Burgum.
And you've probably assembled the greatest cabinet ever, is that this time you're not just courageous, you're actually fearless. And it's your fearlessness to take on the issues that other presidents would not touch, whether it's the work that we're doing with successfully streamlining and right-sizing government, or whether it's taking on the issues at the border, or whether it's embracing the power we need to win the AIDS race. You're fearlessly doing that, and that creates, and just all of us can sprint because you're running ahead. So thank you for that.
Alex, at first you look at this and you think each one of them is maybe just trying to survive in the snake pit administration by staying in Trump's good graces, but it kind of seems like it might be darker than that. It looks to me like the adulation of Trump grows in direct proportion to the terrible news that Trump gets, along with the terrible news that Trump gets. What are they trying to accomplish here with this kind of stuff, do you think?
Well, I think the clips that you picked out were really good because what they get at is, I think, is the distinctive form of reality creation that happens around Trump that Pam Bondi in particular has to kind of create, like this sort of massive crisis that they're all facing down. And, Burgum similarly, I think, gives the game away a little bit by admitting at least that what they're doing is risky, or at least that they should be afraid of doing it. But that, that huge, decisive, world-shaking action is required when I think, certainly in the cases of, I think, the two big tentpole issues, right, tariffs and the sort of authoritarian immigration response, it's just not true at all. And so what you see is Trump trying to bend the world around him to agree with him, right? In a lot of ways, it's how he uses social media as well, that especially in his first term. And I think that what you're also seeing here and what really stands out to me about these meetings, with the exception of Marco Rubio, who once again looks like he would rather be literally anywhere else in the world, that he now is surrounded by people who can sort of aid his reality altering project, and he's trying to use that to kind of benefit, to at least justify the crazy fascistic things that he's doing.
Yeah, and that leads me to your piece, which kind of lays out a bunch of structural reasons Trump's unpopularity is likely to get worse, maybe much worse. So, number one, even if the tariffs were to succeed, which they almost certainly won't, it would take a really long time. Two, the situation in Ukraine is going to deteriorate further despite his promise to solve it literally in one day. That was his actual promise. And three, Pete Hegseth's incompetence is going to create worse crises, even as Trump is absolutely dug in against removing him at all costs. So can you talk about that deep pattern?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we've entered is like what would ordinarily be a terminal phase of any presidency, right? We know what the conditions are for the rest of this presidency, essentially, even if he's not going to back down from the tariffs. And like he, in some ways, can't, that this sort of trade uncertainty is going to continue forever, even if he were to pause Liberation Day temporarily, right? And at the same time, like I think the damage there is already done, that we're going to have supply shocks simply because of that announcement in and of itself. We were already sort of wobbly recession-wise, thanks in large part to the policies in this administration, in February, right? So the odds of there being a recession are significantly high. They've been exacerbated by Trump and Musk's policies. They are going to be further exacerbated by whatever budget Congress ends up putting together, whatever reconciliation package they end up putting together. And then you look and you say, okay, well, let's say that the GDP continues to contract or growth continues to be anemic. There's no actual policy that they can embrace to fix it. Trump has said that tariffs are themselves the medicine to do it. And this is an administration that has rejected the sort of neo-Keynesianism of the Biden years, flawed though it may have been, but it was a successful macroeconomic policy. Right. And relatedly, I think we're also heading towards, which I don't think I did mention in my piece, but we're heading towards a huge confrontation with the Federal Reserve if that happens. And one that I think will further sap investors' confidence in this administration. It will cause the stock market to spiral down. And I think even if Trump were to get what he wanted, right, which is someone who will aggressively cut interest rates, I've talked to a bunch of people in economic policy and economists who are just not convinced that even if that were to happen, that it would make a huge difference. So I think the big picture trends economically are bad enough, and that even if you were to reverse course, that they wouldn't change. And, as you mentioned before, there's a litany of other things as well that I think if you're looking at this administration from other lenses, particularly I think in foreign policy, but I think also in immigration policy as well, that you're just seeing, a succession of scandals, right? And that are just going to pry people loose. And, the sort of germ of that piece just came from reading an NPR poll that came out for the 100th day yesterday, where they asked respondents to grade Trump. And, the top line number there was that, twice as many people gave him an F as gave him an A. So I think 46% gave it a failing grade and 23% gave an A. But what stood out to me about that is that the 23% number looks increasingly like a floor to me, right? Like those are people that are looking at the chaos of the last 100 days and saying, 2 thumbs up, we want more of that. Well, you're going to get more of that. And, I think if that continues, that's all that's going to be left.
I'd like to close by getting at what I think is a really deep tension that kind of flows out of Trump's pathologies. As we talked about earlier, when Trump actually seems to learn something from the markets and adjust accordingly, like when he dialed back some of the tariff stuff, a bunch of people that he seems to respect on Fox News rush in to provide this positive reinforcement by saying, that was a great decision, Mr. President, in hopes that he'll learn from that. But then on the other, when the news gets really bad, like it just did, there's this intense internal pressure inside MAGA world to kind of build a wall around Trump and like really turn the adulation and the sycophancy and the North Korea subservience up to 11, which works against the goal of getting him to course correct. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, it seems to me like that latter force is the more powerful one within MAGA. And as a result, as the crises get worse, they will become more dug in against correcting.
Yeah. And I think that, part of it is, I think that they've drunk the Kool-Aid on the idea that they are part of a world historical project, right? That they are remaking the country, and that actually requires to be requires constant maintenance, both in terms of messaging and action. And so I think what you're seeing is partly just an exercise of people who are failing and incompetent and are, in many cases, actively sort of anti-constitutional, justifying their own the necessity of what they're doing, or at least of breaking with a kind of consensus of governance that has existed for a very long time. But I think there's another element as well, which is that this administration does seem to be guided for the most part, by whoever has the most extreme idea of enforcement kind of gets to go ahead and do it. And I think that part of that is that, Trump himself only really cares about immigration policy and tariffs, right? And he has empowered, I think, people that have the most, extremist or alarmist or insane ideas in each of those areas. And then everywhere else, I think, you're seeing this, particularly at Health and Human Services and other things, right? That other people are basically given, there's a vacuum there, right? That no one is going to tell them no, and that they have to kind of tailor what they're doing to be part of this larger progress of remaking the American government. And so I think that to me is a really big part of it. It's just this sense of these people having to say, well, we are the most important presidency since, Lincoln or Washington, and as Trump likes to say, ever.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you hit a really crucial point there, which is that no matter how bad things get, they can just justify it to themselves by telling them, well, hey, who said, accomplishing a world historical overhaul of the American nation was going to be easy? Alex Shepard, great to talk to you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's real fun. Thanks.
On May 14th, the New Republic's editor, Michael Tomasky, and staff writers Matt Ford, Timothy Noah, Tori Otten, and myself will host the next in our series, America in Crisis. With the new administration in place, this event will bring together influential political commentators with TNR's most engaged readers to explore what we can do to fight back against Trump's anti-democratic rampage. Join us on May 14th. You can register at atlasarts.org/events/TNR. Thanks so much.